I've gone full waffle, and it's because I have a monster of a headache right now. Hello, welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. Today I come to you as Cursed Dorothy to tell you all about everything I read in December. Today's New Year's Day and I'm closing out. Well, not quite. I've got a few more videos I need to film, but in terms of wrap-ups, I'm closing out last year. I had a pretty good reading month in December. I've kept track of everything I read, so I would have it all in one place and I wouldn't be flicking through Goodreads like a maniac. I read 23 books in December, which is pretty good going for me. I think last month, or November, I read 27, so fewer. The last 2 weeks of the year/month, I really slowed down on my reading. I just didn't have that drive to read. I didn't have anything I was super excited for, and by the time I got my reading energy back, it was the last couple of days of the year. So there are a few at the end, and I definitely veered away from my TBR, and I'm excited to tell you all about it. Let's go. Let's do this, as ever, in vaguely chronological order, except where there are series. I don't think I read any series this month in comparison to November, certainly. Well, we'll find out as we go, won't we? The first book I finished in December, which feels like ages and ages ago, was Angel Mage by Garth Nix. This is the library version because I have unhauled my physical hardback version. Sorry, I'm wheezing so much. I'm going to go take my inhaler and then I will be back. She was a girl and she had a chronic lung condition. What more can I say? I definitely liked this more than I liked it the first time I read it. I thought that the magic system was quite cool. In this world you have angels, which are sort of, I guess they kind of function a bit like superheroes you can summon, but they have a really specific purview. And each person will have like a couple of icons that they use. So you might have the icon of an angel who can light your way in the darkness, but only on the third full moon of the year or something like that. And there are obviously more powerful angels, but the cost of using their magic is higher. So that whole element of it is very cool. But the actual plot is kind of meh. Like, it's sort of drawing from the Three Musketeers in a weird way. There's somebody trying to take over the world and some ordinary people brought together in order to stop it. But you never really get enough of the character of the ordinary people to care about them. It's weird because Garth Nix writes really good characters, and in this it just sort of falls flat. So I have unhauled my other copy of this. I have not returned my library books yet. It's okay, they're not due back till April. But in my criteria of I only want to hold on to a book if I want to reread it, I don't really want to reread Angel Mage, and it's a standalone, so that's fine. Continuing on with the library books, if you watch my vlogs, you will know that I basically dedicated a whole week to a set of library books that was chosen for me at the library, and the second one was Sisters of Sword and Song by Rebecca Ross, and I like this more than I thought I was going to. It's sort of like an ancient Greece, very, very loosely inspired magical world, and you have two sisters, one of whom is convicted of a crime, the other one volunteers to do some of her punishment. There's a boy, they do an adventure, and I thought it was pretty good. It's like a fun, fast-paced YA. It would be nice if you were looking for a YA standalone. I don't think it knocked my socks off in any way. I'm not dashing out to buy a copy because it revolutionised my world. I thought it was an interesting take on the two sisters in a YA book, because so often if they decide to divide the two sisters, they won't come back together until a sequel, but because this is a standalone, they come back together reasonably early on in the book. I won't spoil it for you, but I thought it was nice to actually get to see their relationship a bit more, which isn't something I was expecting from this book. But yes, wouldn't reread, but had a good time reading it. It is a good book to get out from the library, because then you've read it and you can move on with your life, but it's a good fun one if you see it in your library and you happen to be like, After that, I read Space Opera, which is the densest book known to humankind. This is just one of those books, I will tell you what it's about, but where every paragraph and every page is just one long run-on sentence with oodles of information, and it's humorous in a way, and there were some bits that made me like, do the like laugh. Not actually laugh, but just like exhale through my nose. An alien invasion comes to Earth, but they're not really an invasion, they're just there to say, hello Earth, you need to compete to prove that you are sentient in what is effectively an interstellar Eurovision Song Contest. And Earth's like, great, we've got this, we know music. And they're like, oh no, Earth music is terrible. So you have these two washed up rock stars who are the only people left alive that the aliens think will potentially stand a chance of getting through the competition and not wiping out the human race. That's what happens, but I did not enjoy reading this, is all I will say. It is so dense, it is so aren't I hilarious-y, wasn't for me. I don't think I would recommend, even with my limited knowledge of sci-fi. I think unless you are a die-hard fan of like Douglas Adams but turned up to 15 and less funny, that's my ringing endorsement of this one. Before I continue on with my library books, after that I actually did read Animorphs 13. That video is already up. You can go hear what I thought about Animorphs 13. I'm going to say it here again because nobody seems to be listening. I'm not reading Megamorphs, don't make me do it. All of these library books so far have been 3-star reads, in case you were wondering. I wrote down the star rating, I should tell you. I then read Revolution, another 3-star read. This is about a girl whose name I've forgotten. Andy, who lives in New York. This is all happening after something tragic has happened to her, and she's a bit going off the rails, and her dad says, no, you must come and live with me in Paris, where I am doing DNA testing on some stuff from around about the French Revolution. She's like, fine. Gets caught up in researching / learning about a particular strand of this story. I talked about this in the vlog, but it's one of those books where things get more magical towards the end, and I wasn't such a huge fan of that. I kind of wanted it to be left open as a was this a magical experience, or was this you processing your own trauma? And I think that would have been more interesting, but maybe that's just me. But I thought this was well written. It deals with a lot of quite difficult themes to do with mental health, so if you're sensitive to that, I would say maybe don't pick this one up. But I thought it was pretty good. I think it's the kind of thing that I would have read and enjoyed when I was a teen. It doesn't quite hit that YA crossover thing for me. And the last of those library books, and the one wild card that the librarian threw in for me, was Life as a Unicorn by Amru Al-Kadi. This is their memoir of growing up being a queer Muslim and their relationship with their family and their relationship with drag and their gender identity, and it's really, really well written. I would recommend it if this is the kind of book you enjoy. Obviously, this isn't what I normally read, but I picked it up anyway, and it did make me cry because I am a little baby and I cannot handle people reconciling with their mothers. But I thought this was really well written. It was really interesting. Again, talked about it in the vlog, but liked that there is an acknowledgement of their own privilege within this, which I think was interesting. If this is something you're interested in reading, I would recommend it. Obviously, it doesn't fit with everything else I normally read, so if you're here for the fantasy recs, obviously this isn't going to help you. After that, another few rereads. I reread Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This also made me cry so much, just aggressive amounts of crying from the get. This is my favourite book in her Wayfarer series. So this book does feature some characters from Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, but kind of like tangentially. So we have essentially a AI who's been put in a human body, a human-like body, and is trying to come to terms with that fact and identity, alongside a flashback story of the person who's trying to help her. Or how do you explain it without spoiling anything? It's sort of like how they got to where they are and why they care so much about the AI. And it's really beautiful. And honestly, I don't want to tell you much more than that because I do think everyone in the entire universe should read this book. It's so good. I read more Becky Chambers this month and we will come on to that. But this is just one of my favourite books of all time. It would absolutely be on that list. Oh, I love it so much. After that, I read some YA urban fantasy. I reread Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. This is set in Seoul in South Korea, and we have this main character here, who is a gumiho. I can't quite remember where the emphasis is on that. She is a nine-tailed fox, half nine-tailed fox spirit, and she meets this boy who is not his nice human boy, and adventure ensues. And I don't read a lot of urban fantasy at all, nor do I read many books set in Korea. So this was an adventure and a bit of a palate cleanser, to be honest. I did enjoy it, and I think with this one, it's another one of many, many books on these shelves. I am holding on to it until I read the sequel, and if I really like the sequel, then I will wholeheartedly recommend this. I think it's not quite complete without that. But it's very well written, and if you enjoy YA fantasy, I think this would be one that you would definitely like. It's just not quite my genre. I like a bit more fantasy world. I've got 2 more physical books that I read, but we're getting into the more digital side of the month now. So I read The Mask of Mirrors, which I do have a review. I think that's going up on the pub date, so it won't be up until mid-January. But The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. Let's shuffle so that you can see the covers. I absolutely love this. It's very, very long. I have a whole reading vlog up for it, but it was long but worth reading. It's a great fantasy adventure, multiple POV, everything happening at once kind of city story. So it's got mystery, it's got romance, it's got a lot of everything was kind of my verdict. And I really, really enjoyed it. And the more I think about it, the more I really liked it. And I'm hoping other people will like it too. And I'm really looking forward to the next one. I don't know when that's coming out, but I need it now. Lots of goodness, would recommend. I think I gave that 4 stars. I did give it 4 stars. I think that the reason was it was very slow to start because it's got so much world building to do. And I think the sequel has the potential to be a 5-star read because it's not going to have to do all that world building, hopefully. And then I finished the audiobook of The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Tawny Man trilogy. I am about a third of the way through the third one now. I'm enjoying the whole trilogy. The second book I found enjoyable, but not a lot happens in terms of like big plot things. And reading the third one now, or listening to the third one now, it's just the intensity of plot that has happened in the first third compared to how much actually goes on in the second book. I don't know, it's interesting. There's a lot more character stuff happening and set up for the third book, but I definitely enjoyed it. I think what I'm feeling with Robin Hobb is I very much have to treat them as trilogies rather than individual books because the through thread of the story is so strong. So I don't really think of individual books in the Rain Wilds, I think of them as a set. And obviously that's the benefit of reading them when they're all published. I have no idea how it felt for those who were reading them as they came out. I definitely think of them that way. And so far Tawny Man is not my favourite because there aren't that many dragons in it, but it is pretty good. Fitz is less annoying than I thought he would be. Hopefully I will have a verdict on this trilogy by the end of January. Then I read Fireheart Tiger by Aliette de Bodard. I actually did read this twice this month, but I'm only going to count it as one because I read it twice because I read it fairly ignorantly the first time. So this is a novella. It is about, how to describe it? So the main character is this kind of heir to a kingdom that is at threat, kind of, from a slightly larger kingdom. And the story is really about this character, without spoiling a novella, finding her own feet in a world where a lot of people want to use her. And obviously it's Aliette de Bodard, it goes deeper than that and it's more metaphorical than that, but it's a really beautiful story. And I had to read it twice because I didn't know about basically Vietnamese terms of endearment, and you have characters calling each other little sister, which to my very Western brain was like, oh no, that's not romantic. But actually, if it were in its original context, and it is, it would be. So that was me being foolish, and I read it again, and with that context, it was very, very good. So go in knowing that, and you will have a good time with this. It's not my favourite novella. It didn't quite have enough bite to it for me, compared to some other novellas I've read, but I definitely thought it was good, and I would say if you love Aliette de Bodard's writing, you will like this. If you're not such a huge fan, I think she is one of those writers you know if you like her or not. And if this is your first Aliette de Bodard book, I would look up some of her other stuff as well to get a sense of where she's coming from, because it's quite an interesting perspective. Then another 4-star read, I read Malice by Heather Walter. This is a evil queen, sleeping beauty, retelling, alternate way of telling the story, kind of a wicked sense to it. This is good fun. So we have this main character, Alice, yep, you're getting it, and she works in a grace house, which is basically a place where graces, who are girls with magical powers, do magic, but she is a dark grace because she is part Vila, so she does all of the cursing and the making people uglier, and she ends up being caught up in this kind of wider political web while also trying to figure herself out because she's so mistreated in this community. And yeah, it's really good. I was surprised by how much I liked it. It helps that it's sapphic. Yes, if you didn't know, this is sapphic and it's good. I really, really want to read the next book in this. I'm hoping there will be another one. I thought that the writing was a little bit too much tell and not enough show, but I think that might just be a maturity of writing thing, and in later books it might get a bit better. I would say if you like YA and you like that kind of villain redemption, seeing another angle on a villain, this would be a good option. After that, I have since unhauled it, but I did read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I talked about this a lot in my vlog. My basic verdict is I like the story of this book, but it is about 8 times longer than the story is, and the rest is filled with other things, which if you are 1000% on board with those other bits and pieces, you have a great time. If you're me and you're not really that fussed, it just feels kind of long. And I don't want to talk about it too much because I know some people really love that book and it's entirely a personal thing, but I think if you're not sure whether or not you want to read it and your biggest concern is how long it is, then like give it a miss, you'll be fine. Do the audiobook. It's not worth getting stuck in. That's my feeling. Another reread, I read Forest of a Thousand Lanterns by Julie C. Dow. This is another Wicked Queen villain explanation story. It's not quite a redemption story. I definitely enjoyed this. I use this as kind of my, this is how you write a Wicked Queen retelling, and I have been since I read it a couple of years ago, and rereading it, I didn't love it as much, and it's probably the first time I've ever reread something and gone, oh no, that wasn't as good as I remembered. And maybe that's a timing thing, maybe that's a what else I've been reading around it kind of thing, but just some elements of this didn't feel as empowering as they did before. So this is effectively a Wicked Stepmother, Snow White's Wicked Stepmother retelling. So it's the build up to that, and it's kind of her finding her place in the palace. And while I do really like the fact, and I've talked about this before, that this main character, when offered a choice between romance and power, will consistently choose power, on a reread, you definitely feel the influence of other people in that a bit more, so it feels less empowering, and it feels a bit more like she's just doing what she's told, but by different people. So maybe it needs another reread to set it back in my mind. But yes, sad to have not loved it as much. I definitely still think this is well worth reading. It is one of the good fairy tale retellings. It is great writing, it is a lovely world, it is a great character. It just wasn't quite as punchy as I remembered it being. So after that, I had 2 books that were in one, so I'm counting it as one because that's how it worked out. I did the audiobook of Silver in the Wood and the Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. They are on script and they are put together in an audiobook, which makes a lot of sense because they're not very long. Just a gorgeous set of novellas, really. Silver in the Wood takes the main character Tobias, who is an old man who lives in the woods, in a cottage in the woods, and talks to dryads and takes care of the forest and is like sort of a forest spirit. And he's visited by the Lord of the Manor, the young Lord of the Manor, who's turned up, Lord Silver. And I don't want to get into it too much because it's a novella, but it's sort of about them both finding out about each other in different ways. And what I really like about this novella is that there is a real plot to it, and you absolutely see that plot follow through and get to the end. And the second one as well, The Drowned Country, is another one. It feels just like a kind of installment of these people's story, and I really, really enjoyed them so much that I have bought copies of them that are being delivered here. They are somewhere in the postal system right now, and I just think this is fantastic. And if you want an LGBT novella to read and you don't want to lean the sci-fi side of things, then I would say Silver in the Wood is a really good option for kind of fairy tale folklore fanatics. That's a nice bit of alliteration. Okay, so can you tell I was on a bit of a midnight scribd audiobook kick? Because next I did Dead Djinn in Cairo by P. Jelly Clark, and then I also read The Haunting of Tramcar 051. They are in this alternate Cairo. It's 1910s Cairo, early 1900s Cairo, and previous to the book starting, then somebody bore a hole through to the world of the Djinn, and now Cairo is basically a global superpower. Egypt is a superpower, Cairo is the centre of that, and the main characters of the various books are part of the, I can't remember what it's called, but basically the ministry that deals with supernatural stuff. It's like the Ministry of Magic, but for Cairo, and it's just fantastic. They're so well written. Dead Djinn in Cairo is very short. It's a nice quick murder mystery, but it definitely sets you up with the world and this main character who I absolutely adore. Haunting of Tramcar 051 is following different characters, though the main character from the first one does feature, and that one's really good as well. That one's more of a ghost story, which I thought was really cool. Basically, I really love this world, and I love a murder mystery at all times, and setting one in such a cool alternate world, it's just great. It's so well written. It feels new and it feels just good. If I were to recommend one book off this entire list, it would probably be Dead Djinn in Cairo, and it's only like 40 pages, so I don't know what else you're doing with your time. Oh, it's so good. Then I got back on my review copy kick and I read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a review copy because it's not out in the UK until January the 21st, I think. Might be earlier than that, but it's coming out from Solaris Books in the UK. So this is inspired by the pre-Columbine Americas, and it is a beautiful story about different individuals all leading up to a big sort of semi-cataclysmic event, and that makes for a very fast-paced book. And what I really liked about it is that fact that it's all gunning towards the same event kept everything in line, so even though you're looking at quite disparate plot threads, it's all very clear where you stand as a reader. I'm kind of drawing like a cone, and everyone's around the cone, but they're all going to the same point in the cone. I'm not a mathematician, but that's how it felt to me, and I thought that was really good. And the world building's really cool, there's giant crows, but the actual book as a whole is really, really strong, and I'm excited to read more of the books. I won't say it was my favourite overall in terms of atmosphere. It didn't hit me in the same place as some other books have, but I definitely enjoyed reading it, so 4 stars to that one. A couple more rereads. I reread Seven Devils by Laura Lamb and Elizabeth May. This was a reread for the Space Sirens book club. I don't know when the live is happening for that, but I will put a link to the channel in the description. I've talked about this reasonably recently, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but basically take down the patriarchy from space, awesome ladies on spaceship do the thing. I definitely got more out of it on a reread, because I think the first time I read it, I don't know, I just must have been busy, but it was another time where a reread was really beneficial. I absolutely love some of the characters. Ariadne is awesome, fantastic. I feel like I got more of the relationships between some of the characters who knew each other before the start of the book, which was good, because that was something I felt I didn't get much of the first time I read it. I would say it's well worth reading. It's not my favourite sci-fi of all time, but it is good fun, and I would read more books featuring these characters. My last reread of the month was House of Sundering Flames by Aliette de Bodard. I said there would be a bit more of her later. This is the third book in the Dominion of the Fallen series, which I reread in 2020, and it's very, very good. This is a series that absolutely benefits from a reread. Every single time I read them, I pick a different character's story to focus on, because while it's multiple point of view, but throughout each chapter, so you flit between them rather than it being a chapter is this person, a chapter is this person. And this time I was very much focused in on, I can't really talk about him without spoiling all of the books, but a character who is important. And that was what I was focused in on, and it was very good. I think having read a lot more of Aliette de Bodard's writing since I first read this series, I definitely get more of a sense of the themes that she likes to use. It's really good world building. There are different characters, and each character has a really different story throughout the books, and they're kind of all of equal importance. So that would be my recommendation. If you're reading this series, you can get a bit of a wash with it, afloat in it, adrift in it. That's the word I'm looking for. So I would say pick a character and decide to really care about their story and see how you go, and maybe set yourself up to reread it in the near future. Alright, last three, and there are 2 5-stars and 1 3-star. The first 5-star was A Master of Djinn. This is the first full-length novel in the same universe as Dead Djinn in Cairo and The Haunting of Tramcar 051. 015, 051. That's going to be this whole video. I absolutely loved this. It blew my mind. It was so good. Mystery novel set in that same alternate Cairo. The world building is amazing. It's fantastic, absolutely amazing. It's not out till May, so I don't want to talk about it in too much detail. I will do a full dedicated review for it for those who are interested, but overall my verdict is yes, go and read this, absolutely. My then 3-star read was Curse of the Divine by Kim Schmeckel. This is the sequel to Ink in the Blood. It follows directly on from that book. Potentially I would have got more out of it if I reread Ink in the Blood first, but I don't have a copy of that anymore, and I wasn't certain I was going to love it, so I kind of didn't worry too much about it. I did think this was a really solid sequel. I think if you loved the first one, you will not be disappointed by the sequel, but overall I wouldn't say that the second book made me think, yes, everyone must now go and read these, you know? The one thing I will mention is she makes, you don't need to understand why, but at one point she creates an illusion/real giant bee that just follows her around and like nuzzles up to her, and it was the sweetest thing I've ever heard, and now I want a giant fuzzy bee. Is that where I'm going to leave that one? Yeah, I'm going to leave it on the idea of the plush bee. And the 23rd book that I read, the last book that I read in 2020 was The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. I have absolutely no idea what possessed me to read this yesterday. I think it was just decision fatigue, and I was like, well, this is the next thing that's published, so might as well. And I read it, and I absolutely loved it, and now I am conflicted, because do I include it on my best books of 2020 list, even though it will come out in 2021, but do I leave it? Will I then forget? I think I'm going to have it as an honourable mention for 2020 and make a note to include it as one of the best books in 2021, because I will probably reread it anyway. Another Becky Chambers book set in the same universe as her other books. It features a character who has featured in previous books, and essentially we have this stopping point between, I think, 5 like wormholes, tunnels in space, and it's this planet that basically had no life on it, but has become this hub because it's a place that people have to stop. It's basically like an intergalactic, what's the word I'm looking for? Service station. Yes? Like on the motorway. So we have these 4 different characters plus the person who runs one of these stopping places are brought together because something goes wrong, and nobody can leave at that point in time. So they're all effectively isolated in a little bubble together when they weren't planning to be. It's sort of like a bottle episode of a TV programme, but in a book form, and it's Becky Chambers, so you obviously know it's going to be absolutely beautiful, and it so was. What I really liked about this book is that none of the characters are human. They are all different species, and it's really interesting how Becky Chambers explores politics between species that aren't human and talking about humans when they aren't there, and still creating such a gorgeous story. And so it becomes more about sentience than about humanity, which I think was a really interesting take and a great way to end the series, which it is sadly over. So do I think anyone should go and read this? Absolutely. Do you need to read the other books first? Technically, no. But you should, because they're great. But you could read them in any order. So if somebody happened to give you a copy of A Galaxy and the Ground Within, you could read it and it would make sense. I just want to read it again. It was absolutely beautiful and it did make me cry. Those are my 23 books for December 2020. I had a really good reading month. Now that I'm thinking about it, I read a lot of really good stuff. I think just because so much of it was a bit random, like I shouldn't have really been reading Master of Djinn because it's not out for so long, and now it's going to be weirdly ahead of time. Regardless, it was a really good month. I enjoyed it. I have great stuff lined up for January. You can go and watch my TBR if you're interested in what I'm reading. I now have to film a whole bunch more. I might go and take some painkillers first though. Hopefully this has been interesting. Have you read any of the books on this list? Are any of them in your books you're excited about for next year? Because I read a fair amount of new releases by coincidence. Let me know in the comments below. I would love to know. You can also subscribe because it makes me feel loved and appreciated and it gets me hyped up for the new year. That's all from me and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Sorry in advance if my asthma is bad in this video. It's bad. I don't know what you want me to do about it. After that, another reread. It'll be fine.